this episode, we're going to focus on a part of incident readiness that beginners often underestimate: the written and agreed-upon decisions that remove friction when time is short. When a cyber incident begins, the technical problem is only one part of the challenge, because the organization also has to decide who is allowed to do what, how far they can go, and what must be communicated and approved. If those decisions are not already defined, the first hour becomes a scramble of meetings, confusion, and delayed actions. Policies, playbooks, and pre-approved decisions are how you shrink that scramble before it happens. They turn the early phase of an incident from improvisation into execution, and that can reduce damage dramatically. The goal here is to help you understand what each of these readiness tools is, why it matters, and how they fit together without becoming a pile of paperwork. A policy is a statement of intent and expectation at an organizational level, and it answers the question of what the organization believes should be true. In incident readiness, policies define boundaries, authority, and minimum behaviors, such as who can authorize system isolation, how incidents must be reported, and what kinds of data must be protected with special care. A policy is not supposed to describe every step of response, because policies are meant to be stable over time and broad enough to apply across many situations. The value of a policy during an incident is that it ends arguments about basic principles, because it provides a pre-agreed baseline. If the policy says certain types of incidents require immediate escalation, nobody needs to debate whether escalation is appropriate in the heat of the moment. For beginners, it helps to think of policies as guardrails, because they keep decisions from drifting into risky shortcuts when people feel pressure to restore service quickly. A playbook is different because it is more practical and situation-specific, and it answers the question of how the team should respond when a certain kind of incident is suspected or confirmed. Playbooks often include triggers, goals, key roles, communication expectations, evidence considerations, and typical containment and recovery approaches, but at a level that guides action without turning into a step-by-step technical manual. The real power of a playbook is that it gives people a shared starting point, so multiple teams can move in the same direction instead of inventing their own interpretation of what to do next. For example, a playbook for suspicious account takeover will likely prioritize identity controls, access validation, and careful communication, while a playbook for destructive malware will likely prioritize containment and restoration planning. The exam tends to reward answers that show you understand playbooks as coordination tools that create consistency, not as magical documents that solve incidents by themselves. A playbook supports judgment, but it does not replace judgment. Pre-approved decisions are the bridge between policy and playbook because they answer the question of what actions are already authorized under specific conditions. In many organizations, the delay during an incident is not because nobody knows what to do, but because nobody is sure who can approve disruptive actions. Pre-approval removes that delay by establishing that certain actions can be taken without waiting for a long chain of permission, as long as defined triggers are met and documentation is maintained. For example, it might be pre-approved to disable an account that shows strong evidence of compromise, or to isolate a workstation that is spreading malicious activity, or to block a known malicious domain. These pre-approvals must be designed carefully because they involve trade-offs, but they can drastically reduce harm when time matters. For a beginner, the key idea is that pre-approved decisions are not reckless. They are deliberate, and they exist because waiting can be more dangerous than acting. They are a way of turning risk thinking into action authority before the incident starts. To build readiness strategically, you need to understand how these three elements fit together as a system rather than as separate documents. Policies provide the why and the boundaries. Playbooks provide the shared approach for common situations, and pre-approved decisions provide the specific authority to act quickly when triggers are met. If you have playbooks without policies, you may have inconsistent values and unclear authority, and the playbooks can be ignored when conflict appears. If you have policies without playbooks, you may have lofty statements that do not help people choose actions under pressure. If you have neither, you are forced to invent leadership structure during a crisis, which is the worst time to invent it. If you have all three aligned, the organization can move quickly while still being disciplined. In exam scenarios, the best answer often points towards strengthening this alignment, because alignment reduces chaos and improves outcomes. An important concept for beginners is that incident readiness is partly about speed, but it is also about control, because fast mistakes can be worse than slow actions. Policies and pre-approvals should be designed to speed up the right actions, not just any action. That means they need clear triggers and clear limits, so responders know when they are authorized to act and when they must escalate for higher approval. This is where leadership thinking matters, because you are balancing autonomy with accountability. A good readiness design gives frontline responders room to contain and stabilize, while reserving high-impact decisions for the appropriate authority. It also requires clear documentation expectations so that every rapid action is recorded in a way that can be reviewed later. The exam often tests whether you value both speed and evidence-based accountability, because incident leadership is not just about stopping the attack, it is also about being able to explain what was done and why. Another major readiness challenge is that incidents involve many teams, and policies and playbooks must be understood across those teams to be effective. If only the security team understands the playbook, but operations teams see it as external interference, coordination will break down. That is why readiness requires collaboration, because the people who run systems must see the playbooks as realistic and supportive, not as theoretical demands. Collaboration also helps ensure that pre-approved actions will not accidentally cause disproportionate harm, like isolating a system that is actually supporting critical operations. This is a leadership lesson that beginners can grasp in simple terms. You cannot build a response plan in isolation and expect it to work in a real crisis. The organization needs shared agreement about what is allowed, what is preferred, and what must be protected. When the exam asks about readiness improvements, it often expects you to think about cross-team buy-in and clear roles, not just writing documents. You should also understand the role of decision points, because playbooks are most useful when they guide the team through key choices rather than listing everything that might happen. A decision point is a moment where the next action depends on what is confirmed, what the impact looks like, and what risks are acceptable. For example, a playbook might guide how to decide whether to isolate a system, whether to reset credentials broadly, or whether to take a service offline temporarily. These decisions are hard because they affect availability and business impact, and they are often made with partial information. Playbooks can improve these moments by offering criteria and questions, such as what evidence supports compromise, what systems depend on the affected service, and what alternatives exist for containment. That helps beginners see playbooks as thinking aids rather than as rigid instructions. In exam questions, the best option often reflects disciplined decision-making rather than reflexive action. Pre-approved decisions deserve special attention because they depend on trust, and trust depends on limits and oversight. If pre-approval is too broad, it can lead to overreaction, like shutting down systems unnecessarily or disrupting operations based on weak signals. If pre-approval is too narrow, it does not reduce delay and the organization still freezes during critical minutes. A balanced design includes clear triggers, clear required documentation, and a clear expectation of follow-up review. Follow-up review does not mean punishment, it means learning and accountability, ensuring that pre-approved actions are used appropriately and improving them when they cause problems. This is similar to how a fire alarm system is designed with sensitivity settings, response procedures, and maintenance checks, because you want it to trigger when needed but not create constant false emergencies. The exam often tests whether you can think in this balanced way, because incident leadership is about managing risk, not maximizing security at any cost. Pre-approval should make response smoother, not chaotic. Policies also play a critical role in communications, because incidents often involve sensitive information and uncertainty. A communications policy can define who is allowed to speak externally, what internal communication channels are used, and how to prevent conflicting messages. A good playbook then uses those policy rules and shows how communications should flow during a particular incident type, including what updates stakeholders need and how often. Pre-approved decisions can apply here too, such as pre-approving certain internal notifications when triggers occur, so the right people are informed quickly without waiting for someone to remember. This matters because communication mistakes can multiply harm even when containment is effective. For beginners, the key idea is that communication is part of incident response, not something that happens after the technical work. A mature readiness system treats communication as a controlled process with ownership, approvals, and accurate status. Another readiness advantage of policies and playbooks is that they clarify evidence handling expectations, which protects the organization during and after the incident. Policies can define that evidence must be preserved, that key actions must be documented, and that sensitive data must be handled carefully. Playbooks can then translate that into practical guidance, such as maintaining timelines, recording decisions, and ensuring that tasks and changes are traceable. Pre-approved decisions can include requirements like recording the reason for an account disablement and preserving relevant logs before changes are made. This reduces the risk of losing critical information during fast containment actions. It also supports after-action learning, because without good records, the organization cannot tell what truly happened, and it cannot improve reliably. In exam scenarios, answers that prioritize disciplined documentation and evidence preservation often represent incident leadership maturity. It's also important to understand that readiness documents must be usable, because unusable documents are functionally the same as missing documents. A policy that is too long, too vague, or full of jargon will not guide behavior under pressure. A playbook that is too complex or too technical will not be used when time is short and people are stressed. Usability means clear language, realistic scope, and alignment with how the organization actually works. It also means that people know where to find the documents and that they have practiced using them, because unfamiliar documents are hard to use during a crisis. This is why exercises and training connect directly to readiness documents, even though the documents themselves are written artifacts. You build confidence by using playbooks in practice scenarios and improving them based on what breaks. That cycle is what turns readiness from theory into capability. A common misconception is that policies, playbooks, and pre-approved decisions are only for large organizations. But the truth is that the smaller the organization, the more damaging chaos can be. Smaller teams have fewer spare people, fewer specialized roles, and less time to invent processes during an incident. Even a simple set of agreements about who decides, what gets documented, and which actions are allowed can prevent a small incident from spiraling. The key is scaling the approach to fit the environment, not copying a giant binder from somewhere else. Incident readiness is about clarity and speed with discipline, and those needs exist everywhere. The exam is looking for the thinking that supports that clarity, not for a particular document template. Beginners should focus on the underlying purpose, reducing uncertainty, reducing delay, and ensuring actions align with organizational values and risk tolerance. To close, building incident readiness with policies, playbooks, and pre-approved decisions is about engineering calm before the storm. Policies provide the organization's guardrails and authority boundaries. Playbooks provide shared response approaches for common incident types, and pre-approved decisions remove critical delays by authorizing specific actions under defined triggers. Together, they help teams contain harm, preserve evidence, communicate accurately, and recover more smoothly, even when information is incomplete. They also create accountability and learning, because disciplined records and clear ownership make after-action improvement possible. When you think about these tools as a system, you start to see incident response as something that can be rehearsed and strengthened, not just endured. That mindset is central to incident leadership, and it is exactly the kind of readiness thinking this certification is designed to measure.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.